Good morning, good afternoon. Appreciate everybody taking the time to join Brennan and myself today. Looking forward to talking with all of you a bit about how Revenue Cap One Signal are going to help you drive higher lifetime value in your subscription apps. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Just a quick agenda for today's conversation. So we'll start with some introductions, just quick backgrounds on each of our companies, what we do at those companies. We'll jump into some state of the subscription apps. So this is some great revenue cap data to help you understand what's happening in the space, what are the trends to be mindful of, and what are the areas you really need to focus on to be successful. And then from there, we'll jump into the meat of the conversation and really looking at the messaging campaigns for success. We've broken this up into 3 areas. We'll break down what you need to think about in each of those areas, how you can address them, and then ultimately start to put that into action for your different apps. At the end, we'll have some Q&A, and so throughout, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can at the very end. And then just some housekeeping. Everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive a link via email after the fact. So if you miss anything, they'll all be in there. And you can always find Brendan and I on LinkedIn, or if you're already working with us, please feel to reach out through the different channels there as well. So with that, let's jump in. So I'm Josh Hollander. I head up the customer success group here at OneSignal. OneSignal is a customer engagement platform really focused on helping you engage with users in different forms of media throughout the life cycle. And so we've been doing this for quite a while now. We send a lot of messages. There's about 12 billion sent on a daily basis. That's across multiple different channels. So we work in what's called web push, app push, that's mobile push. We have things called live activities, in-app messaging, as well as email and SMS. And the goal here for OneSignal is really, how do we empower you to message to all of the different users or customers that you have in a way that's meaningful? We've been pretty successful at this, pretty excited to say. We live in about 1 in 5 new apps that are being launched today. And so it's just a tremendous amount of data and volume we have that we're able to leverage to help drive success for the customers that we work with. And with that, I'll pass it over to Brendan.
Thanks, Josh. Hey, everyone. My name is Brendan Knotts. I'm a customer success manager here at Revenue Cat. Been here for a couple years. I'm also a mobile app developer myself. I had a dog training app that I sold subscriptions in. So some of the advice we're going to be talking about today comes a little bit from my personal experience. But also, I work with a lot of our large enterprise clients. So, lots of stories. See lots of different approaches to some of the things we're talking about today. Enough about me. What about Revenue Cat? Well, we are a subscription platform built specifically for mobile apps. Another way to put it is we make it as easy as possible to add subscriptions to your mobile apps. That's really kind of the genesis of how Revenue Cat started. Building mobile subscriptions is a pain. If you've done it before, If you haven't done it before, you're like, how hard can it be? But the APIs aren't always great. Even if they are great, once you start offering on multiple platforms, Apple, Google, now you have to build a lot of backend infrastructure just to track subscription status, right? And then you got to deal with complexities like every year they update the APIs, or every year maybe the definition of what an active subscriber even is, changes. And so Revenue Cat, we do this in 3 ways. We do it through infrastructure, so make that whole building subscriptions easy. And the second piece is business intelligence. So, like I said, if you just want to count how many active subscriptions you have, that can sometimes be a tough question, especially if you're on Android, Apple, and web. And so we make stuff like that easy. We've got charts, we've got different data pipelines, and we also have great integrations, like we're talking about with OneSignal, just to make it as easy as possible to take that valuable subscription data and pass it on. And then the third piece is growth. So, really kind of getting directly involved with helping you find ways to optimize your growth, be it through A/B testing and price experiments, or through paywall tests, things like that. We've got lots of different tools that our developers use to grow their businesses. And as you can see, we work with over 30,000 apps, from the independent developer who maybe doesn't have any revenue yet to very large apps, doing millions of dollars in revenue a month. So, we probably have a tool that will be useful to you if you do have mobile subscriptions. And then, this is a nice segue into, now that you know a little bit about OneSignal, a little bit about Revenue Cat, how do we work together? And I think again, the easiest way to understand it is just it's really easy to take that valuable subscription data and purchase data you're getting from RevenueCat and pass it into your messaging tool with OneSignal and build, very powerful campaigns. And I can't emphasize the easy enough part here, because if you have OneSignal already and you have RevenueCat already, we're talking about a no-code integration to just start sending that valuable data, into OneSignal. And to power any type of campaign you might want to do, we're going to be talking about a lot of them today. Kind of specifically around retention and onboarding and things like that. But this might be valuable to a marketing newsletter, or some other things that you might want to do, maybe a holiday promotion that you want to do. Not necessarily just around life cycle. So yeah, that's kind of the short story on how our two tools together can be really powerful for you. And then, yeah, as Josh alluded to, let's talk a little bit about the state of subscription apps. We can jump to the next slide. Every year, I say every year, we've done it once. We're about to do it a second time, which, this is about the time that we're going to release that new report. But we have all this valuable data from, the 30,000 plus apps that we have now. And, we anonymize that data and we try to look for trends, pull out key benchmarks. We try to tell people, don't overemphasize on comparing, your numbers to somebody else's numbers, but everybody wants to know the benchmarks to just see if they're even directionally kind of going in the right direction. And so with today's conversation, I wanted to pull out a couple relevant ones. As you think about your onboarding funnel and a little bit of like your customer journey, there's some key milestones that everyone kind of strives to optimize. And so the first one we're looking at here is downloads to trial conversion. And so 95% of downloads never start a trial. I put the numbers on here specifically for customers, for developers who offer a free trial and require everyone to go through a free trial. They vary a little bit if you have like a mixed trial strategy where some customers go through a free trial, some skip that part. But the bottom line is, the majority of downloads aren't going to start a free trial. And of course, anything you can do around increasing that is going to increase your overall growth. So, just a number to keep in mind as we talk about some of the strategies here today. Second kind of key milestone is I don't want just free trials. I want people to actually pay. So, that download to paid conversion rate on average is around 2%. Another thing about these bar charts here, so we got the top 25% and the bottom 25% listed here to give you an idea. Again, going back to the concept that everyone's going to be a little bit different. But as you can see here, even the top quartile of apps are only getting 4.2% download to paid conversion. So there's kind of a narrow window here, and any sort of increase is going to have a big impact down the line. So another place to optimize. And then finally, let's talk about those renewal rates and kind of, if you get them to pay once, how do you kind of increase that lifetime value of that customer? And as you can see here, we're looking specifically at annual subscriptions. The numbers, of course, are different if you look at a monthly subscription or a weekly subscription, but the trend is the same, which is if you can get them to renew at least once, that second renewal rate goes up a lot. So, that sort of suggests that you need to do, even if you've won a paid subscriber, you need to do some things throughout their kind of subscription to make sure that they're continuing to see value out of the app, and that, they want to renew and not turn off auto renew, come renewal time. So yeah, just some numbers to keep in mind, and this shouldn't, I know these numbers seem low, but I wouldn't sort of paint this as dire. This is more just like, here's the reality. And if anything, it should be encouraging that, even a little bit of movement in these numbers can have a big impact. So with that, maybe we start talking about how we can help them improve these numbers.
Yeah, for sure. So now we can jump into the meat of the presentation. And so we'll really start to look at how can you leverage Rapchat data and OneSignal to really start to drive forward kind of that conversion aspect, and then the retention. So we'll start first with activation. So first impressions count. I'm a dad. I love dad jokes, so just apologies in advance because you're going to start getting some of them. So what does the opportunity look like? 86% of people say they're going to stay loyal to a business that invests in welcoming and educating them. The analogy I would make here is, imagine as a couple, you walk into the car dealership. You might experience this. My wife walks in, she's looking at cars, they just kind of ignore. I walk in, they immediately greet me. Doesn't matter, we're leaving. We're not buying a car from that particular spot. It's no different in an app. You've got to really make people feel like they're welcomed and they understand what they're doing right away. take advantage of that first impression and really make the most of it. Because when you do that, the top apps see a 14x or 140% increase in page users per download. It's hard enough to get people to download, much less to get them to spend. And so when you are fortunate enough to get them into your app, you've got to take advantage of that first impression and really make sure they feel confident in giving you credit card information or just money in general. So what does that look like? A well-designed sequence is going to really educate, engage, and enable. And this is going to be, there's a lot of varieties of how you can do this. So whether you're a fitness app, you're going to want to really identify what is the goal that you're trying to achieve, and then start to make sure you're positioning content and information to them around that. If you're a shopping app, you're going to want to make sure they understand, what am I getting? I remember when Restoration Hardware came out with a subscription service, people were like, why would I pay to buy furniture? That doesn't make sense. But once you started to better understand it, it really all started to come together. And so it's so important to think about, what is somebody likely to not understand when they first get into my app? Let's make sure they understand that. Then let's start to give them content and reasons to continue to use our app. And then ultimately, let's pay that off by showing them value. And so within OneSignal, we really focus on, how do you create the right type of messaging at the right time to get people to ultimately feel like this kind of information is being delivered to them. And then I know, Brendan, from your perspective, I guess, should we think different styles of apps have different strategies, or what are the different ways you would think about different types of apps to start to talk to their customers right from the get-go, or the data they should be using?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we have this conversation a lot with different apps because, it's natural to want to go around the app store, kind of find your favorite apps or the well-known apps and sort of copy exactly what they're doing. And by all means, steal everything you can that's relevant to you. But the key point is relevant to you. And so, there's, the app category can determine, kind of maybe what your strategy should be. If you have an app that's geared more towards, parents of kids, maybe that looks differently than, a news app that's, just strictly about adult usage. Adult users. And then another thing to keep in mind is seasonality. Is your app, maybe you have a fishing app, and so it's really, all your usage kind of and subscriptions tend to come like right there in those summer months. Again, how you engage, what triggers you use are going to determine what you do. I know another big factor is, what is your business model? Do you have a heavy kind of free use option? There's a lot to do even if you're a free user. Maybe that determines how you choose to put in those sort of conversion triggers, versus an app that's like, you really can't do anything in here unless you pay, and then maybe you end up with a hard paywall and kind of force everyone to make that decision of, am I going to at least start a free trial or pay? And so yeah, all those things in mind, obviously more than what I'm mentioning here, but those are some of the big ones that we look at when we start talking about how should you kind of craft your user journey and your sort of messaging strategy.
Yeah. How about the data?
Yeah, this is a fun one. Because we talked about this in terms of segmentation, right? And usually when we think about segmentation, we think about maybe like, you look at Facebook ads and you're like, this person owns a dog and this person's a parent. And some of those attributes can be valuable, but especially like if you're just getting into kind of some of these messaging strategies, really it's about timeliness. So like when you send that message. So, for example, someone starts a free trial. If that free trial is 7 days long and you wait a month before you kind of send them some sort of like welcome onboarding content, that's way too late. I don't think anybody would accidentally do that or build something like that, but just to give you an extreme example. So, the timeliness of when you send a message. And, this is easier said than done. This is kind of a key benefit of RevenueCat is, we send these things in basically real time. So user starts a trial, we can send that data over to OneSignal and you can trigger that message immediately. Another concept here is subscription status. So, again, it could sound simple, subscribed versus unsubscribed, but, an active user, are they in a trial right now? Or have they finished their trial? Now they're actually in their just normal paid. Are they in an introductory offer kind of subscription? So, what's the status there? Also, it's possible in the App Store to cancel, but you still have access to the app, right? Because maybe you turned off auto renew, which is essentially what we call a cancellation. But you still had, 2 weeks left on your monthly subscription that you've already paid for. So you still have access and it hasn't expired yet. There's a great, opportunity there to maybe identify those users who have canceled but still have access and try to find ways to kind of win them back and get them to turn back on auto renew. So yeah, subscription status, important attribute as well. Then past purchase history, you might have users who used you in the past, canceled, and now they're coming back. So they're not really brand new users, but in some sense, like your relationship with them is kind of restarting. And so, a different messaging strategy based on kind of what their past purchase history has been is a valuable thing to keep in mind as you're building these.
Yeah, and so as Brendan was mentioning earlier, the no-code setup allows you to pass these trial statuses or subscription statuses into one signal in near real time. And once we have that data, we're able to create segments within the one signal platform that says, I want to target all of the users have shown these behaviors or have purchased this type of subscription or signed up for this type of trial or signed up on this day of a trial, to be able to start to group them together and then message to them both as a group, but also in a very one-to-one fashion. And the concept there being, if Brendan signs up for the app in the middle of the night because he's got a newborn or he's dealing with all those kinds of things, he's more likely to read content at that time. Whereas if I sign up during my lunch break, that's when I'm more likely to receive it. And so there's no reason to take that data and sit on it and go, I'm sending all my messages at 8 a.m. the next day. The reality is everybody's a little individualized. So we want to make sure we pay that off in the way that we start to message to them. And so we allow you guys to create that automation within the platform. And so you can tell the one signal platform, I want to send these messages as soon as I see that individual. I want to send them in this very specific time frame. I want to wait this long. Ultimately, our Journeys product tells us, hey, this is the best way to create the program. Now you tell us when to send it. And so you can start to put those types of things here. And then you could also start to look at it from okay, I want to engage these types of users in one way, these types of users in another way. And so you really start to customize it based on who are they, when are they, and what are they. And so get into even more detail of that. You can see what a trial onboarding would look like right here. So this is an example. It's pretty rudimentary, but it is intended to help you understand kind of what is the importance of the timing and the targeting when you start to create these sequences of messaging. So day by day breakdown. So day one, I come in, we want to say trial start, send a push notification. They're on a mobile app. Let's really get them engaged in understanding what is this relationship going to look like. Think of it as a courting period, if you will. So that initial message can be welcome, we're so glad you're here. If you're a fitness app, let's help you reach your goals. If you're a photography app, let's help you focus on getting the right types of pictures created. Next, we're going to jump down to what's a benefit of being within the onboarding. And so they've come back into the app. We can present them with what's called an in-app message. And so this is a full screen takeover of your app. The beauty of this is you own that real estate. You can make it extremely rich and vibrant and really engaging for the user. Take the brand you've worked so hard to build and put it into the One Signal's in-app message so that it feels fully like yours and you're just giving that message to them and making sure they really understand what's happening. As you get a little further into there, day 3 and 4, we can look at what kind of activity have they been showing. Are they coming in regularly, multiple times a day? Do we feel confident they're going to convert? Let's send them down one path, potentially send them a message focused on what is it going to look like after the trial period. If they're not, maybe we need to pivot and actually start to go, hey, don't forget about the free trial period expiring in this many days, or even start to present offers if you have to. We don't want to give away margin, but look, people love discounts. And so it's definitely something to consider when you're thinking about, hey, as people branch and I see them going down different paths, I want to make sure I'm personalizing content and their behaviors to ensure they're getting there. And then at the end, the trial period or grace period notification. This is an important one. Like somebody has gone through the trouble of downloading your app, they opted into the trial, don't let them just leave. Make sure you make that last effort to try to get them to convert if they haven't already, because you spent money to acquire them. You spent money to get them through the process of the 7 days. Well, let's give them that last effort and do everything we can to really try to maximize that. So again, just summarizing this from an onboarding perspective, It's really function, benefit, and progressive. Think about what are they going to get from a functional perspective? How are they going to get around the app? How are they going to make sure that they see a benefit? How are they going to start to communicate, or how are you going to communicate the value to them in a way that they understand? And then just continue to educate through that process so they ultimately stay. Brennan, there's obviously a lot out there when you think about iOS users, Android users, the green bubbles. We won't get too specific, but I mean, how do you really think about, or what kind of differences do you guys see when you're thinking about Android versus iOS or even web?
Yeah, I think for the most part, they're especially Android and iOS aren't as different as maybe people would assume. Your customers, whether they're on Android or iOS, are probably going to share a lot of similar characteristics, and probably your category of app and kind of what your product is probably going to have the biggest determination on how your customers react. But there are some key differences with Android. One of them is it's possible to essentially create a Google Play account without adding a payment method, right? So you tend to see more kind of billing errors or billing issues on Android, which maybe makes you, if you have heavy Android usage, want to prioritize doing some communication when you see users kind of have that billing issue, and then they enter what it's also called a grace period, where they still have access, but technically they need to like reconcile this broken payment method. So yeah, I would say that would be the biggest issue. And then of course, Android usage in the US versus other countries is different. So maybe the localization of those users is probably also going to have an impact on what you do. So it's sort of related to Android, but it's not necessarily driven specifically by Android. Web, on the other hand, it's very different in a lot of ways, just because it's outside the native app experience, and in some ways that's great because you can do a lot of things on web. As anybody who's ever tried to do offers or promo codes or anything in the App Store environments, it's way easier to do on web. It's easier to track. It's just easier to build, easier to execute in a lot of ways. So that's kind of a key difference. But then also, it's a bigger sort of friction point to get users to go make that purchase in a web environment versus just, how easy is it these days? Apple Pay, click, scan my face, I've paid, haven't even thought twice about that bagel I just ordered. So yeah, there's more friction there. Conversion rates might be a little bit lower, but if you're messaging someone, you're sending them an email anyways. I'm seeing more and more of my developers go, well, I don't really want to pay the App Store tax, even though I would argue it's worth it. Different conversation. But if I'm already in their inbox, they're already on web, maybe I can lead them to make a purchase on web, and I save myself that 15% or 30% or whatever the tax is, whatever your situation is in the stores. So that is a trend I'm seeing, and that would be another kind of difference across the platforms.
Awesome. Yep, the trying to skirt around those app stores is a very interesting topic. Awesome. Well, let's jump into the next strategy. So preventing churn. You've done all the hard work to get them to download. They're using the app. Maybe they've even already converted. How do we make sure we don't lose them? You guys have probably seen some form of this stat. It's everywhere. If you're in any type of lifetime value focused business, you know it. Reducing churn by 5% increases profitability by 75%. It costs a lot of money to get people. It doesn't cost as much money to sell them again. You already know how to communicate with them, which is one of the harder parts. So only 2% are ultimately going to buy a subscription. How do we take full advantage of that and really ensure that we make the most of those? It's probably important, though, to start with understanding churn. There's a lot of different ways people can churn. You've got an active churn. So I went into the App Store, to Brandon's point, and canceled my subscription. That is active. We know they are very specifically saying, I do not want to do this anymore. Passive churn, though, is a much different conversation. And this is where we can really focus on trying to help create automation and ensure we limit the passive churn as much. So something's changed. Maybe they got a new phone. And so that new phone isn't going to open the app for them automatically, and you're not going to be able to send them messages on that app until they do open the app. So how do we help them understand, hey, don't forget about us over here? The other one, and I saw this in my previous life, was credit cards expire. The credit cards expire every 4 years, if I remember correctly. We need to make sure we're thinking about that particular piece, because you don't want to lose a good paying customer because you're not reminding them and you're not taking action to get that credit card updated. And that can actually be a very sneaky, big piece of your business. And make sure that's something you guys are continuing to think about. Churn rates vary by industry. Obviously in something like the fitness world, we'll keep going back to that example. January, February are going to be really good. March starts to get a little fuzzy, and then it obviously goes down as you go through the year. So you just need to be mindful of your seasonality, and maybe you do more messaging at a particular time of the year because you know it's going to be more active or less active, and you want to take full advantage of it. When you look at like an Apptopia and places like that, apps lose 77% of their daily active users in the first 3 days, and that's considered a really good app. Is maintaining that 23%. So you want to be investing in that experience and ensuring you're keeping your customers engaged and active as much as possible. How do I do that though? Be relevant, provide value. I mean, going back to the car buying experience, let's say we walked in, they greeted my wife immediately. Okay, they made it through the first gate. Now they need to actually know what they're talking about. Now they need to be adding value. I've gone on the site. I've already built the car, priced it. I've got an understanding. It's no different for your apps. They've come in, they've played a game, they've used a fitness app, they've used, whatever it is. You need to be different. You need to stand out and really make sure they realize you're not just like everybody else. You can copy the basic stuff from the other people, because why recreate the wheel, but make sure you differentiate. And that's what it's really coming down to when you think about how do I communicate with them? How am I using the different channels? How am I using my understanding of what they've told me or what they've shown me to ensure that I'm doing that? Did you have something, Brendan? You looked like you were leaning in.
No, I just love this topic. So, no, actually, I'm just cycling through all my own experiences using different apps that I've canceled or downloaded and never opened. And so, sorry, that was the expression on my face.
All good. All right. So the strategy. We want to get people messaging regularly as they're using the app. The OneSignal SDK combined with RevenueCat's, we have an understanding of what are they purchasing, what kind of subscription do they purchase, how are they using it, and what are we seeing them do within the app. When you combine that data with your own data, you can start to segment customers in a really specific deal or very specific way. Once you start to segment to them, you can start to send them the messaging that makes the most sense based on their usage, lack of usage, or whatever it is to try and ensure they're feeling like that $3.99 they're spending a month is really worth it, and they're going to want to stay. And so the visualization you see here is we have this concept of branching within our journeys that allows you to say, have I seen them do this, or have they taken this action? Depending on what it is, now I'm going to send them the next message saying, yep, okay, you're going down this path. We're going to keep pushing you down that path further. Or, oh, you're off the path. We want to make sure to get you back on that path and ensure you're really getting the most out of this. And if you really think about that user experience and what do they want or what should they be getting, you're going to do right by them. And when you do right by them, you're going to improve those churn numbers. A great example of this is OneSignal and RevenueCat work together with a company called Rapchat. They're a music creation app, and so they've got all the different beats that you can come in and then lay lyrics and all kinds of different things over it. They have auto tuning for those who know what that is still, but ultimately they started with a position of we know we're in a very competitive space, and we know that when we get people to use our app in the right way, they're going to stay with us, and we can actually help them become stars and break through. And so their focus was, how do I not only get people onboarded correctly, we already talked about that, but how do I continue to engage them and help them through this process? Because it can be a little daunting at first as you're trying to create that first song or whatever it is for that particular artist. And so we worked with them, really focused on, okay, take the understanding you're getting from their subscription status from RevenueCat, help us understand what do you want to achieve, and then let's build the process that says they're here, now we want to get them there. And that's how you should always approach the messaging in your apps. You should really think about where is the customer, where do I want to get the customer, and what makes sense to that customer. If you approach it from that perspective, you're going to be successful. With Rapchat specifically, they saw with their in-app messages, they were getting an 85% increase in their click rates for getting people to different parts of the app that matter more to them. And that was a high value event for them. They knew if I got somebody to this point, I was going to be more likely to get them to convert or stay on their subscription. And so very successful.
And Josh, I'll add a little bit more context here. Rapchat is an app that started and didn't have a premium tier at all. So they actually had, it was just free, and there's a lot of stuff you could do for free. And then I think it was about a year before we did this case study where they implemented a premium subscription. So for the first time, they're asking all these people who've been used to getting everything for free to start paying. It's a little bit daunting, but they built a lot of cool new functionality to kind of go along with that new premium tier. And so, but I just kind of give you an idea of timelines there, like, an app that was around for a while, which is just free, they added subscriptions. Okay, then the next phase was kind of, what's in this case study, which is like, how do we optimize the conversion on these subscriptions? And yeah, for them, it was simple because they already had one signal and they already had Rapchat. And so just, kind of doing these different things, prompting for the, converting to paid at the right time, using offers when, people weren't really biting on the full kind of price subscription. And then even doing some other messaging things around just asking, for users who canceled and didn't resubscribe, what would you have liked to have seen, or what would have made you stick around? Kind of just getting that valuable information out the door because, maybe you can win them back later. So yeah, just wanted to give the context for anybody out there who has an app and is like, that sounds really complicated. They didn't do all this on day one. They kind of evolved over time.
Yeah, that's a great point there. I wish we could say we're going to save them all, but the reality is people are going to go. Things change in lives, whether it's financial, personal, whatever it is. And so when they say goodbye, how do we use that and continue to try to learn to get better? But how many of them can we win back and really start to get them back into the app and the platforms? So probability of selling an existing customer or a known customer from this particular instance is 60 to 70% compared to 5 to 20 from new. So bad kind of relationship, right? Like the devil you know versus the devil you don't know when you make those bad choices. It's opportunities to go, okay, look, we got the information based on their exit survey that we didn't do this well. Maybe when you fix it, that's the right time to start to reach out to them and let them know you've made changes and come back and really try to get them to see that you've done better. So it's not just about taking a cookie, placing it out there, blasting ads to them all over the place. You can do that. It's going to be really expensive, and you're probably going to spend a lot on money on ads, but your ROAS will not be extremely strong. Think about it in different channels. I mean, if you have an email address, that's a pretty good way to communicate to people. They still have the app installed. You can still continue to send them notifications or reasons to come back. It's really tailored to like, what was the reason they left? How can you potentially make that better? Or what do you know about them? Were they active users? Were they not very active users? Really, again, going back to the data components, think about how can you use the data to help drive what you're trying to achieve. And when you focus on the best engagement, the time that you're communicating to them, and then ultimately what's going to drive the most response, that's when you're most likely to get people back into the app and be able to have some success. So, Brennan, from your perspective, what are some offers or win backs other than lowering the price? I mean, that's always there, but margins we want to keep them.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest one you can play with is duration, right? So it was like a popular strategy for a while to only offer annual subscriptions. Like, look, if I'm going to convert anyone, I'm going to get a ton of money up front. And your numbers do usually go up and to the right for a while, right? But you're probably leaving a lot on the table as well. And it's okay to maybe have that strategy. Like, look, I really want to funnel people to an annual subscription. Maybe your app takes time to really realize the full value, or talk about fitness apps and you talk about the whole New Year's resolution, and then the drop off that everyone sees. If you're a regular gym goer, you always know sometime around February or maybe even sooner, like the gym's going to open back up again because everyone's going to give up on resolutions. In that case, if you're a fitness app, I'm going to lock you into a year just to give you a little bit of extra incentive. So in any case, play with duration. So if they didn't bite on the annual subscription, maybe you can get them to try a monthly or a weekly subscription. And that'll be enough to kind of prove your value, because you got to remember, like, there's a lot of unknown as a new user using a new app, and maybe that concept is familiar, right? But let's say you've never used a photo editing app before, and with everything that's happening with AI and these photo editing apps, like you're maybe just curious, but you don't know if there's value for you there yet. And so you're not going to bite on an annual subscription, but maybe you'll pay for a weekly one or a monthly one. And that'll give you enough taste of what's out there for you that then you'll pay, like gladly pay for the annual subscription and maybe get a little bit of a discount for going annual versus paying month to month.
Awesome. So how are we going to execute this? Renewal pricing, you can obviously do an incentive. That's not always what we're going to recommend, just because we want to keep money in there. But really help people remember, like, I'm here. I want to help you. This was the reason you joined at first. Using that fitness one, it's an obvious, like, hey, you said you wanted to lose 10 pounds. Come back. Let's make sure we do that. Or if you're on the photo side, it's like, hey, you want to make sure you're getting the best pictures of the kids or the fall photos. This is the time to do it. Take full advantage of kind of seasonality, the opportunity that's particularly there, and create messages that are really focused around that seasonality, the personalization of knowing who are they, what are they doing. And then again, if there's new education potentially, we can bring that into play as well. So, photography, new cameras came out, whether it's mirrorless now, take full advantage of helping them understand, like, learn about the mirrorless cameras, or if you know what specific camera they had, help them understand, hey, we've got new content specific to this camera that you were talking about, or you told us you had. It's really making them feel connected to what you're doing so that they're like, yes, I want to go back to this, versus feeling like, no, I spent that money, I don't want to do that again. Yeah, and so finally, it's, think about the reminders that you're sending them. What are they going to lose? How are they going to miss out? People have FOMO. Take advantage of it. Make sure they know how to use the premium features. If you've got the free version, premium feature, let's ensure that they're doing all of the things that are going to make them feel like they're getting more out of it. In-app visuals, again, we talked about that. That can be the big messages that take over the entire screen. You own that real estate. It doesn't cost anything to be able to do more in there, so take full advantage of that. The renewals, look, we can try to pretend renewals aren't coming up, but talking about a renewal and reminding people it's coming up isn't necessarily a bad thing, or leveraging the opportunity to let them know, hey, we're going to do this at the renewal, and these are the rewards and opportunities you get by staying loyal to us, and we'll stay loyal to you. Celebrate membership, offer discounts, it's there, we have to talk about it. And I think Brendan talked about this earlier, but if all else fails, get some feedback, learn how you can be better. We're all constantly evolving and trying to change, so let's get as much information as we can so that we make those changes for the better. Awesome. Well, with that, I think we've come to our Q&A. So it looks like first question's from Ethan. Brendan, can you see that one? Because it's for RevenueCat.
So we have one RevenueCat project with two different apps sharing the same backend. Any chance for RevenueCat to integrate two OneSignal apps? Yeah, this comes up a lot. I'll have to check. But certainly you could send me an email at brendan@revenuecat.com. Remind me of this question, also give me a chance to kind of follow up with you when I dig into this a little bit. But just sort of kind of breaking all the different data objects into kind of like component pieces and making it easier to be more flexible around what you integrate with. I mean, the same question comes up with Stripe. So if you do have web payment integrations, lots of people want to use multiple Stripe accounts with the same RevenueCat project. But if you follow us on Twitter, or you kind of follow our monthly updates, you see that we're building lots of new functionality. So chances of us building something that you need or want can usually be pretty high. But yeah, please send me an email and we'll follow up on that.
Awesome. If a user opts out of marketing emails and push notifications on signing up, how can you work around this and still try to create engaging onboarding? Great question. So there's definitely the desire to have as many channels as possible. This is where in-app messaging really becomes very valuable. Now, when somebody comes into the app, you own that real estate. And the reality is you can do what you want within that real estate that's going to help further your cause or your mission. And so that would be one way to really think about messaging to them. If they're not giving you any type of permission to send an email or a push to bring them back into the app, it is so important that that first experience you create within the app is a meaningful experience, and they're going to understand, okay, I've really got to come back to this because this is going to help me do X, or this is going to give me the benefit of Y. And so that's where the in-app messaging is going to be so valuable to you. And then the kind of cherry on top is over time, as you're seeing engagement because you achieved the success you were looking for in that initial onboarding, we've got strategies and tactics we can bring to bear to help you get those opt-ins so that you do have those additional channels to do communication to them in the future.
Yeah, and the only thing I guess I would add there is, I think the in-app real estate is extremely valuable. Honestly, as a, my own personal use case, that's where I tend to like my onboarding content. Like, I like the email as a sort of reminder, like, hey, you signed up for this, welcome. And maybe you have some relevant kind of content for me to click through and see how to get started. But mostly I want that kind of guidance when I'm in the app. But I would say another thing is, I'm a little bit leery personally of signing up for more emails and having to unsubscribe from emails later. So, still use your social media channels. I follow a lot of accounts on Twitter or Instagram because it feels kind of less intrusive. But I always want, it just gives me a chance to kind of keep up with what's going on, with those brands or those apps. So, if you're looking for something slightly outside the box, I would say, leverage those if you don't have an email. And keep in mind, the value of email is decreasing a little bit, especially on iOS, because so many of us now use that hide my email. So even if you have my email, it's not my real email. I've hidden my real email. And then rather than even bothering to unsubscribe in your system, I just, tell Apple like, hey, I don't forward these to me anymore from this made up email address. So yeah, I would say get creative in terms of where else you might try to reach people outside the app.
It's a good one. I like that one. We've got another one. When is the best time to send the win back offer? And then the follow-up, when they cancel or after they expire? I think there's no perfect time, is the bad answer. The good answer is you want to try to use data to understand what is the likelihood they're going to cancel. And the smarter you get to be able to start to predict that based on usage patterns, how far are they getting in terms of depth in the app, so not just time spent or number of visits, but actually like how many of those more advanced features are they unlocking or leveraging. You can start to predict, okay, this person's looking like they're going to churn. That's when you want to ideally send the message to them that is focused on, hey, don't forget you have this opportunity, or you're missing out on this. We haven't seen you do that. That's a great way to start to get kind of ahead of the churn. If they've already churned, then the messaging just becomes a little different. And so you send a message that's more focused on how do you get them back. And you've seen the "we miss you, come backs." Those work in some instances. There's also the like, hey, we've updated this, we've added that. And so it can really be more of a product focus approach for those particular users versus just the like, hey, be empathetic towards us. Come on, come back. We need you.
Yeah, Josh, one thing we haven't talked much about, on this webinar, because it'd be a whole nother webinar in and of itself, is testing. So, directly to this question, I would say you have to test with your user base. And some things to keep in mind is a cancellation doesn't mean they're going to churn, because so many of us are kind of just hardwired to, I start a free trial and I immediately go turn off auto renew because I don't want to get caught off guard with converting when I didn't mean to, because I can always go back and convert later if I want to. So some of us turn that off automatically. That might look like a cancellation, and you don't want to just necessarily give just, hey, here's a discount to please turn back on auto renew when they were probably going to do it anyways. So there's different reasons, and really the only way to know for sure what's going to be right for you is to test some stuff.
Yeah, great point. Okay, looks like our last question, and then we're going to have to shut it down. What's a good volume of emails and push to send to a user in different stages of their life cycle? Month 1 being new and onboarding versus month 3 engaged in using the app without overwhelming them. So generally speaking, we always recommend that in the onboarding phase, you're going to want to send no more than 1 to 2 messages per day at most. I will take that a step further though and say you really need to look at the usage patterns of the customers to make better decisions. If they're taking all the actions you expect and they're seeing the value, try to decrease that a bit. You don't want to be intrusive. If you see they're missing the key pieces or they're not going down paths that you think matter, again, you can start to bifurcate and say, okay, we need to send this person the 1 or 2 a day that we were focusing on because we look like we might lose them. Once you get out of that onboard phasing, then it starts to become, okay, how do we continue to engage in it? And my recommendation is always no more messages, whether that's email, push, SMS, than they are visiting sessions per day. Now, that can still be high if you're like a mobile game and somebody's coming in every 30 minutes. You don't want to message them every 30 minutes. That is not going to be a good experience. But if it's a fitness app and they're coming in once a day, they're doing that morning workout, that is a good amount to be like, hey, you're doing great. Here's how you compare to other people. Or we missed you today. Let's see you later today or tonight. And really try to continue to encourage that habit and make sure they're getting the most out of the app, just as you intended originally. Okay, well, really appreciate Brennan taking the time today to join us and have this conversation. Appreciate everybody attending. As we mentioned earlier, since you registered, you will get a copy of the webinar in your email, so keep an eye on that. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Brennan or myself. You can find us on LinkedIn. If you work at the companies already, feel free to reach out to us through the company email addresses as well. But again, appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you.